Hi, I'm Jesse Chandler with the Connecticut Performing Arts Center, and I wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the set I constructed for South Windsor High School production of A Play That Goes Wrong. On the surface, it seems like a fairly simple set, but there's a lot of mechanical features in here that make it a little more complicated. So one of the biggest challenges of this show is creating walls that are functional, that can support things, but that also can fall down at the end of the show. So I did that by creating a 2x4 framework that can hold everything up, and then creating these walls that are basically thin facades. I use thin plywood underlayment. Because it's stiff, you definitely don't want to use like the flexible hardboard because that flops all over. And actually it really helps to have trim or rails attached to the plywood to give it a little more rigidity. Stiffness is really important here because the more these walls are able to flop around, the more likely it is that these thin plywood panels will snap when they fall. The approach I took required me to join multiple panels together to form a single section of each wall. That was done by cutting strips of plywood and then attaching them across the seams, thereby creating a strong, unified piece. To attach the frame, I use these blocks of wood that are glued and screwed to the back of the plywood. I then drilled holes through each of the blocks that extended into the frame, and I used pins to lock the panels in place. These pins were from hinges. They're just the pins that go into the hinges. We happen to have a big box of them at the theater, so it was helpful. I also put a washer on there so that it's really quick to grab and pull out, because sometimes these pins can get in there kind of tight. It's important to try to avoid that and make it easy to pull out. But once these are all in place, then it should hold up the wall nicely. This is a large wall, and it's held up by 9 different pins, and some of those are actually really high up there, so rather than having to pull each pin individually, I attached each pin to a thin cable using a nut like this. And then I used a series of pulleys to redirect the wires so that they could all be pulled from a single location. I recommend this 0.8 millimeter cable I got off Amazon because it's super thin and barely visible, and it's rated up to 100 pounds. I also recommend these pulleys because they have a lot of options for attaching them in various positions. I'll include some links in the video's description if I can. So to hang this curtain rod, I actually just used the hanger that came with the rod. I put a slot in this paneling that it can slide through. You can't just have it hooked on the paneling though, because then the weight of the rod will just pull the paneling away from the frame. And so what I do is I actually had a little elbow bracket there that it can press against it so that it's not attached to the paneling at all. Then this part, this is a little block that I put on the hinge so it can slide down and basically lock that bracket into place. So there's a hinged block locking each of the hooks, and their corresponding cables are passed through pulleys and joined together at a single washer. So when I pull this string right here, both of those will disengage at the same time and the curtain will fall down. So this is our shield. It's mounted on the wall. It's supposed to swing down and whack Chris in the face. So the way that I do that is I put in this hinge that's attached to this board that basically this can slide into the wall. And I slide it in at a 45-degree angle so that the momentum of the swinging board doesn't just pull the nails out. Because it's angled, it won't. We also have a metal plate mounted at the top to attract the magnet that's on the other side. So basically this part here can just slide right into the 3 grooves. So on the other side I have a spot that's predefined where the magnet needs to be. And basically I have a wire that goes through down to the ground so that when this is tugged, the magnet will come off, the shield will fall down. So this can be pulled and you can whack him in the face. Then you just need to push up on the shield to detach it from the wall. This is our rotating bookshelf. When I designed this, I actually wanted a reason that it would get stuck and not work. And so I put in this lever that you crank it in order to move the bookshelf. But someone backstage has the ability to move it right back. Because we're doing the high school version, her hand also gets stuck in the bookshelf, and we wanted a reason for that. And so we have a little pin that can be removed on this thing, so when they're trying to struggle, it actually gets pulled out. On the back side, this is kind of the little rod I created that's attached, and then a pin can be stuck through, and that way it keeps it securely attached, and you can rotate it from the back as well. I put that nail there so that I know when it's vertical. That kind of makes it handy. It stops there. So when it's time for them to pull it out, then they just have to pull the pin so that the lever can be released. So at the bottom of this bookshelf, I use a set of rotating pivot plates. You just have to make sure that they are centered really well. And then we have wheels. These are the non-pivoting casters. That they just need to be set in each of the four corners. You just have to make sure that these are angled tangent to the circular path that they're traveling. In hindsight, I would have used bigger wheels and just recessed them further up into the bookshelf, because I ended up covering this whole place anyway with a panel. The other really important thing is that you need to put a lot of weight exactly like at the center, right over this Lazy Susan pivoting thing, to make sure it doesn't slide at all. So I just use these 40-pound weights. They're part of our fly system. And I use 3 of them, so 120 pounds, just to make sure that there's no way this bookshelf can slide, but it can still pivot really well. Then at the top I have this bolt that also needs to be aligned really well with the axis of rotation so that they can rotate together. Just requires really precise alignment to have this rotate and have a nice tight tolerance on each of the 2 sides. For our coat hanger and our barometer, I actually just use some strong magnets that hold them in place. If you look on the back here, I have this, it's attached to wire so it doesn't get lost, and I have it marked where the magnet goes. And so they can remove the magnet if they want it to fall. So with our portrait here, basically I just have it hanging on a nail that's turned upward. But on the back side, that attaches to a block that can be rotated, so the nail then turns downward and the portrait falls. Since it falls so many times, it's important to reinforce it really well. With this frame, I added Gorilla Glue, I added brackets on each of the corners. And I also added these boards, which are glued to the back piece, and that kind of channels the nail. Because they have to put it on and off a lot, then it allows the nails to get caught on this and channels to attach to the wire in the right position, so it's very easy to hang it up and have it straight. So this is our fireplace. It has these panels that can be popped out during the show. It also has this mantle. I just have it held on with one pin because it doesn't have to stay there very long, and the pin just slides up through there and then up through here, and it's just barely resting on it so that when someone bumps it, it falls right down. I also, for the fire, I just took this LED bar, wrapped it up in some orange or red film, and I basically just slide it right in here, and that gives a nice glowing effect when the lights are off. So in this show we have 2 removable doors. This one is just clamped on with these clamps. I attach the hinges to this 3/4 inch board, which just clamps into place. You can also use the clamps that rotate, but if you're in a hurry, sometimes those are kind of hard to do. This is really quick to just slide up so the door can be released. You want to clamp at the top and at the bottom to make it stable. So for the other door, I just installed it with the hinges on the outside, because in this case, it's the crew members that come out and they deliberately take the door off. And so the fastest way to take any door off is by popping the hinges off. So they get out their tools, they hammer, pop out the pins, the door can be removed. We also have them with an electric screwdriver, trying to take off the knob and arguing over whose method is better, just to kind of give a little more noise and chaos in the removal of the door. So then we have these swords. They're just from the props closet, and luckily they have a bolt on the bottom that can be taken off so these can slide, and it comes apart simply by swinging it. And it really helps if you have a wingback chair because at one point the sword's supposed to get stuck in the chair. So we basically have a groove to target. We just put a little cut on the back side. And then in our case, someone on the back can clamp it really quickly. So when they go to pull the sword out, it won't go anywhere. And the last thing I added was this chandelier that is rigged to fall during the bows. Don't do that if you don't know what you're doing. But one thing that's really important is that you have a long spring. You can't really see it up there, but that can absorb the impact because if it just falls and catches, then that can tear your chandelier apart. You also have to make sure that your chandelier is a very sturdy, durable one. But basically the idea is you have it on a pulley. You hoist the cable up some so that there's some slack in the line. Can't tell, but it's hooked onto something on the floor so that when it's time to release it, you unhook it and you can just let go and it causes it to fall. Takes a little trial and error to ensure that your extension cord is long enough to reach it in the case that you want it to stay plugged in. That's up to you.